everyone, how are you doing? Hope you're keeping well. What we're going to be doing this week is taking another look at some more classic White Dwarf issues. But before I did that, I wanted to give you some news. So there was some sad news a couple of weeks ago now, but very shortly before I was filming this video, so it's quite fresh to me. Our very good friend Matthew Street sadly passed away. I know you probably have seen that in various communities. He was a big man for sure in the old hammer and the old school gaming community, and really up and coming illustrator. He was doing some work for some pretty big publications just before he was taken into hospital for the last time. So it's very sad that he's gone, cut off in his prime, and I will do a proper memorial video for him when I've had a chance to pull together some thoughts and some artwork, and it's not quite so fresh for me when I've had time to sort of digest it properly. So that it was quite a shock, and I know it's surprised a lot of people who didn't see it coming. So yeah, that's very sad. That shortly followed by Bring Out Your Lead, the annual Old Hammer event, which for me, recording this, is in 2 days' time, so that would be a good opportunity for me to get together with some friends and talk about him. But also I will do a proper kind of video review of that again when I've had a chance to kind of collate some footage and some thoughts and things and put it together properly. So that will be coming. And in some happier news, I have in this box behind me the bits for this year's advent calendar. All the cardboard bits for this year's advent calendar have come, and they are great. They're nice thick cardstock, lovely printed printing quality. They fit together nicely. They unfold in the way that I wanted them to unfold. I'm not going to show you too much because I don't want to give anything away, because part of the joy is unveiling it and seeing what's there. But yeah, this has worked out really well, so I'm really happy with that. I've got to go and pick up the moulds from Chris and spin loads of miniatures, and then I'm hoping that will be available to pre-order from the website at the beginning of next month, so September. So it will be limited. I've got 100 copies to sell, so if you want to get your advent calendar in time for Christmas, make sure that you get your pre-order in nice and early. I will be taking it to Colours in September, and if there are any left, I will be taking them to Ravalli in Bristol. So I'm confident that they will sell. So get your orders in nice and quick. I'll talk a little bit more about that probably in a future video. Members will have already seen the kind of making of side of it. So if you're interested in seeing how the ideas came together, why I've taken the approach that I've taken this year as opposed to what I did last year, how that's evolved and shifted, and how the advent calendar is going to work as a game, then yeah, you can sign up for channel memberships. If you're on a PC, you just click join down below and it will take you through it. It's a couple of pounds a month, and you'll get access to that, and you'll also get access to the members miniatures, and there's a bunch of fresh members miniatures going up in the shop shortly, including this little guy that you won't be able to see here, but haha, teaser. Yeah, so I need to paint him up and get him in the shop, and then yeah, that will be available. So yeah, well worth a look, I think. Ask the opinion of other members what they think. Anyway, shall we get on with having a look at a couple of White Dwarfs? Let's do that. So we have time warped back to August 1987, when I was 3 years old, but other people were older than me and able to enjoy this glorious issue of White Dwarf, still celebrating the 10th anniversary of White Dwarf, 1977 to 1987, and we have a cover which, to all intents and purposes, looks like one of the kind of licensed image covers that White Dwarf previously has been getting from various fantasy artists. But no, in fact, this is an in-house image, although I don't think it appeared anywhere else. You might be able to correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think it appeared on a Games Workshop publication, but this is an early Dave Gallagher painting. If you're familiar with Dave Gallagher's later works, very prolific, of course, with box covers and book covers and things from the 90s. This is an earlier, very much more sort of sword and sorcery style illustration of his, but nonetheless, pretty cool, pretty funky illustration. Here's a whole teaser page for Warhammer 40,000. Rogue Trader, of course. Not Rouge Trader, but Rogue Trader. I'm going to scooch through. We've got a lot to get through, so I'm going to scooch through a bit of these, but it's worth pointing out they're still making a big thing of Stormbringer here, that being fairly current in the rules. RuneQuest and Robin Hood were both mentioned in recent issues. There's some interesting stuff on the Awesome Lies page. This is the kind of taste and news page for forthcoming Games Workshop stuff, and the development of the Power Behind the Throne series is very much underway for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. This is where the next scheduled it's what we're talking about, Enemy Within, campaign. So this is talking about the book, The Power Behind the Throne, and how it's now spread and grown and become 2 books. So you're now going to get The City of the White Wolf, A Guide to Middenheim, and then The Power Behind the Throne as a separate book. And the next book in the series is also underway. You'll know it as Something Rotten in Kislev, because that's what it came out as, and it's indeed mentioned here with a working title, Something Rotten in Kislev. However, that wasn't the first working title. Yes, that could have been called Dead Guys on Parade. Maybe not so catchy as Something Rotten in Kislev, and Harvest of Death as an also working title. So there you go. That could have been called other things, but it did in fact come out as Something Rotten in Kislev. The first Daka in White Dwarf, and Warhammer 40,000, the sci-fi skirmish rule system, now going through typesetting, scheduled for release in September as a 200 plus hard page book. There you go. Oh, and a nice little mention here down of the Nightmare TV series, which was a great favourite when I was growing up. Now in production, coming out in September. Nice for it to get a little mention in the pages of White Dwarf as a kind of roleplay adjacent thing. Here are some new releases from Citadel. Ninjas, of course, feudal Normans, dwarves, imperial dwarves in this case, and some wizards. The CO2 wizards line continued to expand with a bunch of new wizardy types, and the Minotaur there. Some great names here. The dwarves particularly: Grosh, Handhelm, Slosh, Flathelm, Nosher, Fullhelm, Bolsh, Orccleaver, Sir Donald the Quail, Sir Rex Raffles, King Diamond, definitely not a nod to King Diamond there, Dim, Glum and Grim, the drummers, and Drip, Snivel and Dewey, the standard bearers. The Normans have got, of course, Philippe, Blizzard, Yule, René, Daniel, Stéphane, Clozu, Decor, Timoth, Guicard, Pascal, Jean-Paul, René Martin, Dubois, Albert, De Gaulle, Matthias, Raphael, Gaston and Luc. Very suitable Frankish names. And obviously not Frankish because they were from Normandy, right, which was not Frankish, but there you go. That's the names they've chosen. And I'm not going to try and do the names for the ninjas, because they're such things as teriyaki and sushi. Yes, I think that might be not quite the right thing that they would be called these days. The Eternal Champions range. We've seen how Stormbringer is still a thing in White Dwarf. It's going to carry on being a thing. There's some Stormbringer adventures coming up in these pages. Not this magazine, not these pages, but in future issues. And here we have the release of the Melnibonians and the Pantangians for that. Now, have you ever wanted to work at Games Workshop? Well, here's how you can apply. And what I found interesting about this article is that it's very demanding, actually. So it talks about how there's no real training you can do to do this job. There's no training available to be a games designer or a miniature sculptor, or well, I guess there's training for being an artist, but there's no training specifically for working at Games Workshop. The only way that you can pick up the skills, according to this article, is to already work for another company. So that might be okay if you've done journalism and you want to work on the White Dwarf team doing layup and things. But it says here, yes, that's right, we'll seriously consider potential new recruits to our model making staff only if they have worked for other figure companies. So you have to have already had a foot in the door in order to work for Games Workshop. So how do people get around that? Well, I mean, at this time, Games Workshop already had a fairly good core of designers and sculptors and so forth, so they probably didn't need to worry too much about it. But they do talk about how there are lots of other avenues into working for the company, so going into the factory and the layup team and the sales team and the administrative team and all of that kind of thing. We know that there were a bunch of people who got into Games Workshop through that, demonstrated their modelling talents, their skill, their rules writing talents, and all the rest of it, and then were moved sideways into other areas. So there was a way of getting in, but it was perhaps through the side door a bit more. Thrud the Barbarian continues his new image as Thrud the biker barbarian with his chainsaw, and in this case shows you just how good the chainsaw is as an implement for getting rid of wasps. It causes a little bit of damage along the way, but ultimately Thrud gets his man. Here are those cool goblin battle chariots, drawn by their snarling wolfers, of course, and here are some viewer scripts for Gobbledygook, some readers' suggestions, some readers' scripts for what Gobbledygook should be up to. And rather than just pick one winning script, there's 4 or 5, depending on how separate some of these little interspersed things are, which makes quite a massive page of stuff to go through. And you probably can't see it very well on screen, but there's some funny stuff in there. It's very diverse. Shall we see how diverse it is? There's Gook being given all of the odd jobs to do by the hobgoblins, or by his bosses at least. There's this little 3 panel strip here about Gook's meditation and reading and all of the rest of his high level pursuits. There's some little Nibble scripts here, and then there's a bit more classic Gook getting locked up in a dungeon. We now have a confusing article. So this is about racial psychology, and we're going to call it racial psychology because that's what it says here. There may be a different way of saying that now, but it's basically talking about the differences in the outlook on life between elves and dwarves and halflings and the other types of creatures that inhabit the Warhammer Fantasy world. But the reason that this is confusing is because we have a discussion on elves here that morphs on this page into a discussion about dwarfs, because the remainder of the elf article is in fact here, and the dwarf article starts here, runs down here, and then picks up this page where it talks about halflings and gnomes. So yes, it requires a little bit of backwards and forwards to read it, but it is quite interesting. It talks about things like the elves need to process stuff through sort of editing dreams. So they don't need to sleep, but they do need to sort of shut down their consciousness and go through their dreams and get rid of unnecessary bits and retain useful information, because they live such long lives that their brains otherwise couldn't handle retaining all of the facts that they need to know. And dwarves do something similar, apparently. It's an interesting, well-reasoned look at, okay, what do we know about these races, and what effect might that have on the way that they view the world and each other. Here's a Chainsaw Warrior article. These are all the bits that were left out of Chainsaw Warrior. So all of the early rules, rules variants, suggestions for extra rules, and a little bit of correction. Oops, we left off the numbers on the Chaos Agent cards. You might have noticed that this is actually wrong. This doesn't work very well, having played it a bit more, so we're going to correct it. That kind of thing, a Chainsaw Warrior FAQ article. Here's an article on demons in RuneQuest. John Quaife being very clear right at the beginning. This article is about demonology in RuneQuest 3. It has nothing to do with Satanism or real, in inverted commas, supernatural forces. Anything detailed here is not real and exists only in the imagination of those playing the game. I have written about Mavmaramis below, but I feel no compulsion to go and summon her, nor do I believe she exists. She doesn't. I made her up. But to my character in the game, she is real and indeed a force to be feared and reckoned with. So if this is the case, how can this document drive you to corruption or suicide? I know it's fantasy. You all know it's fantasy. It's just ignorant critics who don't. The whole satanic panic thing. Just because I'm writing an article on demons doesn't mean that I go and summon them or in fact think that they exist. And this is a quite a thorough and quite a nice article, in fact, on summoning demons. It goes into great depth as to the kinds of things that demons require, the kind of things that people might want to do to make sure that they're safe, the ways that demons will twist people's words and try and find loopholes and things, interspersed with these documents, excerpts from the documents of sending, which are kind of faux medieval script. Yeah, it's very fun. And then there's a whole section here on how the games master can run demons and use demons, bearing in mind how powerful they are, what their limitations should be, how people can constrain them, how the GM can take advantage of players not fully thinking stuff through. And then there are a whole bunch, and this goes on for several pages, a whole bunch of example demon creatures of various entities of various types. So yeah, it's a very comprehensive article. It's well worth a read should you be interested in your players summoning demons in games, of course, not in real life. No Return to Satanic Panic, please. Here we have some more classics. Those Chaos Dwarves, before the Big Hat Chaos Dwarves came out, when at the same time Marauder were kind of doing their mini version of Chaos Warrior Chaos Dwarves, and Chaos Thugs, with the classic 80s hairdos and kind of Mad Maxy bondage stuff going on there, and the fighters, many of which I painted earlier this year for my Warriors Combat Cards deck. So Sir Crispin of Talabheim here, the Orc-Dwarf Captain, Jan Oakhart, the Templar here, and Anthony of Avaland were all featured in that deck with slightly different names, of course, but all these paint jobs and all very much there. And these guys will also appear slightly later in the magazine. If I can find them, don't want to give you too much in advance. Here they are in the heavy metal pages. There you go. So some of these are making a second appearance in the magazine as well. Scarlock's Wood Elf Archers got their release this month. That classic Wood Elf unit with, of course, Glam, the War Dancer. The wonderful Nick Bibby Orc War Wyvern. Best wyvern ever sculpted, with apologies to anyone else who's ever sculpted a wyvern, but this is the best one. And I hate snakes, but I still think this is the best the best one. And a really cool Dragon Masters dragon, with some really nice little kind of flavoursome text as well. The Marrowsucker Orcs had all but forgotten Hogblood, their one-time chief. He had gone away some time ago, and nothing had been heard of him since. So when a stranger wandered into the village, claiming to be Hogblood, and wanted to take over again, they were sceptical. And then he introduced them to his new friends Zog Zog the Shaman and Polly the Wyvern, and he explained why they hadn't heard anything from the neighbouring Neck Snapper tribe for a while, and at this point the Marrowsuckers realised how happy they would be to have their old chief back. Absolutely. Here is an adventure for AD&D. Although it kind of feels a bit more like an adventure for Pendragon, or something a bit more chivalric, I guess. Basically, a paladin has got himself into some stuck, as paladins often do. Their chivalrous drive has led them astray, and they've been suckered in by a nasty seductress who has promised them all kinds of things and not quite told them the full story. And the players have to go and track down what's happened to this paladin and try and rescue him from the clutches of the evil enchantress. And on their way, they have an encounter at the Fleur de Mal, and you don't have to be an expert in medieval French to recognise that Fleur de Mal is not going to be a particularly pleasant place for you to spend a night, and in fact, it is not. The peasants are truly revolting in more ways than one. With such great place names as Scumbridge, Little Snivelling, Grungedale, the dark, horrible woods, and the really scary woods, and the very nasty woods. Yeah, it's a lovely place to spend your time. It really is. The Lichmaster Scenario Pack and Blood on the Streets, otherwise known as the Riding scenario packs with their villages there. Here's the errata for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. As anyone who's written a book for publication will know, you go through it time and time and time again. You proofread it within the length of its life. You give it to other people and they find more typos. You give it to somebody else, they find more typos. You take it back, you find more typos. And you go, that's it. That must be all of the typos found. And you send it for print. And lo and behold, you get it back and you open it. And the first page that you open it on has a bunch more typos on it. So it's unavoidable, I think. But we try and avoid it still. And here they are correcting some of those issues. This heavy metal article that we flicked to, that's an interesting word, flicked to and flashed to were the two words that I was going for there. We flicked to, I think I will go with. We flicked to it earlier, or flished to it. It has some... I think this is distinctive because it has some images that were very prevalent in further painting articles for years afterwards, for like a decade afterwards. You would see this. I remember seeing this image in a painting guide with how not to dip your brush, like anyone dips their brush up to the ferrule there. Well, maybe they do. But yeah, this paint pot was long out of production by the time I started painting, and it was still the photo they were using. There are some cool pictures here. The bony bomber there. The guys that we've mentioned previously from the combat cards. This hobgoblin dude here. Some Zoets. And this, the Lichmaster and Ranlak the Black and Mikhail Jackson and the plastic skeletons with ogre-faced shields. Excellent stuff. Here's the range, of course, the paint range at the time, not all that broad. Thrice upon a time in Mega City 1, Marcus Rowland taking further adventures into Mega City. He's obviously very keen on the Judge Dredd role-playing game at this time. He's written many things previously, and these three adventures are really small. And the idea is that they get interspersed within whatever else might be going on. They're really extra things to throw at judges simultaneously with other plot lines, so that everything gets confused and meshed together, and players have to run here, there, and everywhere and try and keep track of what's going on, which is absolutely the best way to run a game of Judge Dredd, of course. And then we have the letters page. which is going back to some staple arguments here. Yes, we've had recent articles on women in role-playing and female characters in role-playing, so there's a bunch on the representation of female characters in role-playing. We've had some talk about role players versus live action role playing. So we've got some discussion of in defense of and in defense against, no, in prosecution of. They're both in defense of those two sides working together and claiming that they should be distinct and separate things, and live action role playing has no place in the pages of White Dwarf. And then some actual discussion of some of the recent articles, some of which is very amicable, some of which is massively objecting, but to me is just a lot more interesting to get that kind of engagement. But it's great. It's great actually that the letters pages at this time gave that ability to have a kind of engaged, if not a conversation, at least to make some viewpoints. Lots of magazines, I guess, would be too bothered about the impact of showing a side that was contentious and the damage that it would do to them to print it. Certainly, these days you've got to be a bit careful about that kind of thing, sadly. So there we are. We are at the end of White Dwarf 1987, August 1987, and we're going to jump forward 5 years to August 1992, and a Fangorn cover, looking very much like an 80s cover, but there you go. It's, I guess we're not that far out of the 80s still. You know, we still tend to think that the 80s stuff stopped in 1990, and it really didn't. A lot of the stuff that I think of as 90s is very much late 90s, early 2000s, and a lot of the stuff that I think of as being an 80s, certainly an aesthetic, was in existence long into the 90s. So there you go. I guess trends take a little while to die out. They're not tied to decades. You've got a free transfer sheet on this one, and we're going to come back to that a little bit later. These, however, looking very much like 90s photographs of Games Workshop setups. Remembering that we're only in 3rd edition still for Warhammer Fantasy. 4th edition is just around the corner, but it's worth bearing in mind for this issue that we're not there yet. Neither are we fully into Warhammer 40,000 2nd edition, the 1st edition after Rogue Trader. Those shifts are still to come, even though aesthetically very much there in a lot of the emerging photographs. Here are some interesting paint jobs by Massimo Colombari. Very bright, very vibrant. Not actually my favourite of ways of painting miniatures, although I can absolutely, it's a bit shiny. I'm just going to try and turn that off so you can see there. I hope that's not made it too dark. That's the problem with lighting something, is that you get, there we go. You get shine where you get light. So you can either see it, but you can't see it because there's a big shiny patch across it, or you can't see it because it's too dark. I get, for Chaos, it's great, and they're very vibrant and very eye-catching. But actually, my favourite bits of this page are like the head and shoulders of this guy here with his sword, and the cage here where there's slightly more natural coloration. It shows he's a really good painter, a really, really good painter. His blending is lovely. I just find the colour choices a little bit wild and out there, but that's me being a bit restrained, maybe. So remember those free Citadel transfers that you got on the cover? Well, here's how you can use them. And we were talking just a moment ago about images that were used in subsequent modelling guides. Well, I certainly remember the application of transfers in future modelling guides throughout the 90s definitely featured putting these spiderweb images on these forest goblins. That image got used for a long time afterwards. And these forest goblins and night goblins, very much new at this time, just about coming out. We'd seen sort of the Empire stuff the Orcs and Goblins were just starting to change into this 4th edition look and aesthetic. So these were not available at this point. I don't think they were just kind of coming out and very much marking the aesthetic of what would be the 4th edition Fantasy Battle. Space Hulk got a computer game release. I never played it, but I played a lot of Doom at the time, and it has very much that kind of aesthetic. I like that it works in kind of live action. You give your orders, and then you click go, and the computer does the stuff, and that you're controlling a whole squad of Space Marines. So you've got to try and keep your eye on all of the screens, trying to work out what's going on. And these images with the geniuses, I mean, yeah, they're the kind of pixel art that you would expect from the time, but I still find that quite scary. I think if that was a realistic, it's almost more scary because it's not a glossy, realistic image. It's got that kind of gnarly, pixeled look to it. Anyway, I don't know. I'm rambling. Commissar Yarrick and Ghazghkull Thraka get their profiles for Rogue Trader. Again, they're going to be big characters when 40k, the actual what people think of as 40k, so 2nd edition, very different to Rogue Trader, comes out quite soon after this, and obviously Yarrick and Ghazghkull Thraka will be significant figures within that. We've seen Mag Uruk Ghazghkull Thraka previously, of course, because the character originated within Adrian Wood's Space Orc Army, and the character was then developed into this actual Games Workshop stock sculpt figure. In addition to their background and how you can play them in Rogue Trader, you can play them in Space Marine as well. There you go. You can play them in Epic. We've got part 1 of a Felix and Gotrek story by Bill King, taken from the, or not taken from, but following the stories in the Ignorant Armies, Wolf Riders, and Red Thirst collections of stories. And it's not a bad saga for what it is. It's actually one of the more engaging pieces of Warhammer fiction that I have read. So well done. It works in this kind of short story. Oh, it's not that short. It's several pages. There's quite a lot of the magazine given over to it. But it works in this kind of short story format. And this is part 1. Part 2 will be coming next month. And Felix and Gotrek have, in this tale, joined up with a sewer patrol to hide a little bit while the heat is on, as I guess it always is for that pair. They've joined up with these unmentionable types, patrolling the sewers below the city, and of course, what you find in the city. I'm going to say this properly. In the sewers beneath the city. What do you find in the sewers beneath the city? There we go. That could have been a worse tongue twister, but in the sewers beneath the city, what do you find? You find Chaos Ratmen, otherwise known as Skaven, of course. And just flicking through, it should be very apparent that Skaven are the theme of this article. Not article, story, narrative, plot. Get your words right today, come on. Kent Martin and Eric Watson's work here with some really cool scratch-built vehicles. It says this is a converted Blood Axe Land Raider, but I don't know. If you're anything like me, you look at the size of the Orc here driving it. I don't think that's converted. I think that's scratch-built. It maybe has the tracks from the actual thing, but you would have no difficulty in fitting a squad of 10 Space Marines in here. You could probably have 2 stories inside this Land Raider. It's definitely a little oversized. If this was a photo in that I saw online today, I would think, oh, you've done a digital file and you've printed it, because obviously we're in an age of 3D printing robbing the soul from the hobby. Haha, there's a contentious subject. You can talk about that in the comments should you wish. So yeah, we're in an age of 3D printing, and people 3D printing stuff at upscaled would very much lend itself to creating that effect, which doesn't actually work, I don't think. This one is great. This one, I think all of these little round rivet studs, they look too big. The axes look too big. This glyph on the sides is ridiculously huge. I think it looks like the wrong scale, which is what you get when people upscale files and print them out. They look wrong. There you go. That's just my 2 penny worth. But the rest of the painting, this is superb painting. I love seeing Mentor Legion Space Marines. Every time I see this Harlequin High Avatar painted in this kind of way, I think, oh, I should repaint mine. I had a very definite idea what I wanted for mine, but it didn't come out quite as I intended it to. Adrian Wild takes us through another classic modelling article on hills and woods. The absolute things that you need for your battlefield, of course. And scale independent, You're doing crags like this by melting styrofoam. That works for both epic scale and for 28mm scale. And a little bit of discussion as to putting some cliffs and rocks and scraggy features into your woods to stop it from looking too much like a golf course. Imperial Outriders for Warhammer Fantasy Battle. Further movements from 3rd edition to 4th edition, of course. You can see how we've no longer got cool and willpower on the end here. We've just got leadership covering everything. And then we've got an article on dwarves and the various dwarven holds up the World's Edge Mountains, and the language of the dwarves, and the runic alphabet of the dwarves. So there was a recent when I'm filming this, discussion on, I think it was the Old Hammer Facebook group, about the Dwarf Armies book that never was. There was almost a Dwarf Armies book for 3rd edition coming out at the end of 3rd edition, but it didn't happen because they decided to wait until 4th edition was released and then start releasing the army books for 4th edition. But I reckon, this is Nigel Stillman, and I think they were talking about Rick Priestley having written a bunch of that, but they were talking about the language, and in here there's, if I skip through those pictures, there's stuff on the language and the runic script, a full breakdown of what all the runes mean. I reckon a lot of this information was designed for the idea of a dwarf army book coming out, and it didn't happen in 3rd edition, but it was going to happen not long into 4th edition, so probably a lot of this stuff got reworked for that. Here's another opportunity to work for Games Workshop. We saw that 5 years earlier you needed to have worked in the field already if you wanted to do anything other than sales and marketing and work in the factory, but here we are looking for stuff for our retail stores. Basically they're looking for retail staff, and again, a lot of people who went into those stores, as we've seen photos in here from people who worked in the stores. If you attract the attention of Games Workshop head office, you can find yourself moved to head office or the design team. You just got to show willing and show nous and show skill and ability and get up and go, and I reckon that's still the best way to make it somewhere. But I know employment opportunities not what they used to be, maybe. Marauder Dwarves, which again, of course, some of these would get subsumed into the main Citadel range for 4th edition. Still, to my mind, some of the best dwarves ever sculpted. Lots of people are are big fans of Perry dwarves, and I love Perry dwarves as well, but to me the absolute epitome of dwarfishness is these Marauder large-headed no need dwarfs. We've covered this, and then we're at the catalogue pages. And of course, if you want to go with Gotrek and Felix adventuring in the sewers, here are the Jez Goodwin Skaven, again the best Skaven ever released. I'm not going to qualify that. That's just true. No offense meant to Colin Dixon's wonderful work, but yeah, for pure ratty griminess, you can't do better than the original range, I think. Here's some dwarfy stuff. Here's those Perry dwarves, which, you know, they're nice. They're lovely. I like these dwarves. They're just not what's immediately in my head when somebody says dwarf to me. But that might be, that might just be exposure to Marauder dwarfs prior to Perry dwarfs. I don't know. And there we are. I'm going to zoom in on this if I can do it without adjusting the focus. There we go. There's some lovely dwarves, mostly Marauder dwarves in that image, facing these wolf boys that we've seen before. So these are John Blanche's wolf riders. They were in the background of a smaller image in an earlier issue, and I said, oh, I'd really love to see those up close. And so here we have the privilege of seeing John Blanche's wolf boys a little bit closer, not super close. I'd still really like to see more of what's going on here with the command group. This guy's got, it looks like he's got the Fire Dragon Exarch helmet modified onto the his kind of barded wolf with a great big bad moon headdress. There's loads of cool stuff going on there. I wonder if that model still exists, or there are other images of it. I would love to see them. But for the moment, I shall be happy with this slightly closer up view of John Blanche's wolf boys. Thank you for joining me, and I shall see you again next week.